Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Wynn's Kitchen podcast. I'm your host, Wynn Austin, and the founder and CEO of Wynn's Kitchen. I am so excited to introduce you to my guest today. Hilary Cocalis is the founder of SipWell Wine, an award winning California canned wine. They are female founded and Black owned. Welcome, Hilary, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Wynn. So excited to be here.
Well, you obviously know I'm a huge fan of your wine.
Likewise, likewise.
And I love the convenience of canned wine, especially when I'm golfing or, kind of sneaking it on the beach. Don't tell anyone. But tell me a little bit about how you got into the wine business.
That's a good question. How did I get into the wine business? I started really, I think, just being interested in wine as a personal hobby.
Mhm.
My day job actually was in beer. So I worked in the beer industry for a while. I on the marketing side. So I worked for a craft brewery in San Diego named Ballast Point.
Oh,
And then I worked for they were acquired, so I worked for Constellation Brands, which was the new parent company.
hmm
Um, and I I mean, I love beverages of all kinds, but I think when you're talking about beer for work and drinking beer all day, um, for me, the last thing I wanted was another beer when I got home. So I
yeah,
started drinking more wine and getting more into wine and learning about it. And so that was kind of the journey. I started taking classes and got certified all on my own on the side. And, I was also sort of thinking about this idea for a premium quality canned wine. And that's kind of how I got into it.
that's amazing how that works. And I agree with you. I actually used to love Ballast Point beer and I drank it a
Hmm.
lot, but you know, when I get to a certain age, I couldn't really be drinking beer
Yeah.
anymore. For so I started switching over to wine, and I know that you started off with wine I think now you only carry sparkling wine, correct?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
before you started off with how many SKUs did you start off?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, we started off with sparkling wine actually. So, our
Oh,
first ones that we released were sparkling white, called Tiny Victories, sparkling rosé, which is called Rocksteady, and a sparkling red, which is called Go Getter. And my original plan for the business was to do only sparkling wine. Um, but we had an opportunity to do some still wines, and we had gotten some feedback that people wanted to see a red wine in a can or wanted to see a still rosé in a can. So we made those. We did a couple of releases of still wines, but um, I think I probably should have stuck with my gut with the sparkling wine because those are the ones that sell the best, and those are the ones that I think we're more passionate about making, and we have a unique process for making our sparkling wine. So we bring something new to the category with the sparkling wine where we didn't with the still wine. And kind of the lessons learned early in the business is stick with your guns and also focus, right? Like this
yeah.
allows us to really focus in one lane and really do it right.
I completely agree with that. Otherwise, it gets so hard to really pitch. Like, what are you pitching? Like, how are you
Hmm.
different? And so tell us a little bit about like where is your wine produced? Like what vineyards? How did you find them? Like I just know how to drink wine, but I love learning about
Yeah, it's funny. Drinking wine is not the same as making
it. It's
wine.
not totally different than running and producing a wine business.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And that's what's tough too, because I don't have a traditional winemaking background. So I had this idea and I wanted to start this. And then the question was, well, where do we make it and where do we source from? And I knew I wanted it to be California grapes because I live in Southern California and I love California wines. And I just started reaching out to winemakers and asking questions and all that stuff. And um, pretty quickly targeted the Paso Robles area in terms of production. It just seems there were a lot of resources for me, very friendly people willing to share a ton of information,
Mhm.
and also close to my home base in San Diego ish. I mean, it's a 5-hour drive, but it's closer than Napa or Sonoma.
Yes.
to produce. And so we found kind of the area first, and then for sourcing, um, I started just checking off needs on my list. I wanted to make sure that the wines were at minimum certified sustainable, if not organically farmed. Um,
Mhm.
we started with a combination of both. Now we are fully wines made from organically farmed grapes, which is really cool to say. So that helped narrow it down too in terms of who can we source from, because there are only so many people that do that. Um, and then it kind of changes from release to release. We're still small production, and we don't have long-term contracts. We don't have our own estate vineyards, and so it's about building relationships in the area and finding folks that can work with us for the flavor profiles we want, and the type of wine we want. And because we make sparkling wine, that's its own animal to try and get, something that'll work for a sparkling wine. But it's been fun. It's been fun um, to really get into the winemaking side of the business and really understand production and understand
Right.
the limits of an agricultural crop too. So, it's
Gosh,
grapes. And
you
so,
don't even need something.
yeah, yeah.
That's so cool. And so, like I have to admit, before I didn't really drink a lot of canned wines. Usually when I'm like in a bind, right? Like I
Right.
would never thought I'd be like promoting canned wine, and I don't think I've ever had sparkling wine in a can before I learned about your brand. So what made you decide that going canned wine is the way to go?
That's a good question, because I mean, I've had my fair share of canned wine, and there are some really nice ones out there, but a lot of what's out there is not great. I think canned wine has had a bad reputation, especially among like core wine drinkers. And um, for me, it was a serving size question. I think, the personal problem I was having was that I wanted to be able to have a single serving of wine without opening a whole 750 milliliter bottle.
Right.
And, these little splits are hard to find, especially in good quality wine. I think the stuff that comes in single servings in various forms tends to be cheaper, lower quality, filled with additives, super
Yeah.
sugary, not, bottle quality wine, that the kind of stuff I like to drink. And so um, it was honestly probably my background in beer that I didn't really have any misconceptions about cans. I saw that cans were a great format for really good liquid. And
Mhm.
I knew it was going to be a challenge coming into the wine space, because for some reason wine, is just starting to get on board with it. But for me, it was a no-brainer because it was serving size, convenience. I
Mhm.
saw that it was good for the quality coming from the beer side, and so I decided to just go for it.
That's awesome. I think it's brilliant. I mean, I like the splits, but it's just not convenient when you're on the go, right?
Right.
Like
Especially
it,
on the golf course
yeah,
or
yeah,
on a picnic. Yeah.
on the picnic, and then and I have this fear of like drinking a glass, like a glass bottle, and then the golf cart hits a bump and it like breaks my
Hmm.
because I don't
Right. 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 Right.
happening with like my friends that drink out of a beer bottle, and I'm like I have like weird teeth nightmares already as it is. So like so when I learned about your wine, I'm like this is brilliant. Like I love it. So I'm a huge fan. And so each of the wines that you have these fun little names. How did you come up
Hmm.
with those names?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I think I mentioned them at the top, but our wines have names like Tiny Victories and Rocksteady and Go Getter, and our brand name is SipWell. And I think from the start, I really wanted to be able to make this about celebration,
Mhm,
celebrating hard work, hardworking women, especially. I think um, it to be honest, what I found, and maybe this is my marketing background, so I'm very like eagle eye, but a lot of wine marketing and sort of the memes that you see on social media tend to be around wine for stress or coping, or, you see the mom holding the mug that says like, this isn't really coffee, and things like that. And so,
Especially during the pandemic, right?
right, exactly. I think especially during the pandemic, it was a lot of joking about wine for coping and wine for stress and drinking alone. And I wanted it to be immediately from the jump that you knew that this was a wine for celebration, for people who work hard, for people that are connected to their community. And that was really the inspiration behind the wine names. Tiny victories. Let's celebrate the little wins, not just the big celebrations. Go getter, like, celebrating that you're working really hard and this is your reward at the end of the
That's so fun. I love it. And
day.
when I first found out about your wine was I was at the San Diego Open because I'm sure
Mhm.
I'm a huge tennis fan, and so
Same,
they
same.
were
Mhm,
giving out cocktails, you like kind of like spritz, like like
mhm,
a spritzer using your products. And I noticed the names right away, and I just thought, I'm like, oh my gosh, I love all the different names for these wines. So I think that's really great to kind of put a positive spin of, it's not like, oh, I'm having such a bad day, just need to go down a
mhm.
whole bunch of wine.
Yeah,
It's to celebrate. And it is nice it does help me control the amount that I drink also. So in each
mhm.
can has how much wine? Is it a glass or?
We say it's about a glass and a half. So each can is 250 milliliters, which is a third of a bottle.
Oh,
So depending on how many glasses you normally get out of a bottle, we say about a glass and a half of
okay.
wine in each can. Yeah.
And then when did you start your company? When did you launch?
We started selling wine in May 2021. So the beginning of the summer in 2021.
Mhm.
Kind of that height, or at least after the first year of the pandemic. I started working on it in summer of 2019. So it took 2 years from saying, yes, I'm going to try to do this, to actually having product ready for sale. Um, a big part of that was the pandemic. And
Yeah.
as you know, I'm a mom, I had two
Yes.
kids at home. I had to kind of put everything on pause
Yes.
and, be the preschool teacher and all of that. So,
Oh my gosh,
um,
I remember those
but
days.
yes, yeah. But I think but the upside of that is that I think it gave me more time to really think about how to launch the business, and I think it also changed people's attitudes and habits around drinking. People were more used to ordering alcohol online. They're more used to different formats and single servings and things like that. So, I think kind of the dynamics of the pandemic helped us out a little bit, at least to get us going.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think we probably have a similar story there where, it took me 3 years of not sure if I wanna start this business or
Mhm,
not, to like, okay, well, every day I would do a little bit of research, and I launched, officially, I think it was September 2019, so it was right before the pandemic,
mhm,
and then but I think at the same time, like our culture, and especially if you see LinkedIn, there's like this fast culture, like, oh, you have to, you have to hit a million your first year. You have to, get into so many stores right away. And I think that with the pandemic, it helped us kind of get the feel for things, right? Like,
mhm,
okay, I got into one store, then I got into two stores, and then learning from servicing those two stores, and growing from there. So what has been your biggest challenge in this business?
oh man. I could like list them off, I feel like. Um, I mean, it's, fun challenges, right? Like there's things that sort of like for me personally, it's just been a challenge to figure out how to run a business and figure out all the stuff that I'm not good at, finance and operations and logistics and all of that stuff. That's been kind of the like
Mhm.
challenge to myself. I think there are bigger challenges for our brand and kind of for our industry, but I have a big challenge in just kind of what I was talking about earlier, of just convincing people that this is wine to be taken seriously. I think a lot of people see the can and they immediately write it off, and then I have them taste it and they're like, "Wow, I've never had canned wine like this," or "Wow, this is the best canned wine I ever had." And so a big challenge is just changing people's minds, right? I mean, that's a huge part of what we have to do every single day. And then I think, coming from the corporate world and having big teams of people to do things and a lot of resources, I think learning how to be scrappy again, how to get stuff done with, we're a full-time team of two. So how do
Right.
we get everything done in a limited amount of time? And especially as a mom, I can't just devote my entire time to working on the business. So trying to balance it all has been probably the biggest challenge, honestly.
Yeah, and I tell people there really is no balance, right? There's some
Hmm.
days it's going to be more, kid focused, and some days it's going to be more work focused. And I know I think being a mom is my favorite job, but it took
Hmm.
me until my kids are older until for me to realize like, these younger years don't last forever because I had another business when they were born and younger that I worked so much and it's
Hmm.
tough, it's and still still managing the household too. It's very
For
difficult.
sure. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
um
I was volunteering at my kid's school this morning. But honestly, that's why I wanted to do this. That's why I got into this because you know, either way, I was probably going to work hard. It's just in my nature. And so I
exactly.
could do it grinding away at a corporate job where I can't control my schedule and I have to travel and have meetings, or I could build something that I feel good about and I could take the morning off to go to school, or I could take the day off to do something, with my family. And, I only have to answer to myself, right? So that's a
Absolutely.
huge part of it.
I think flexibility is huge for moms. And I'm
Hmm.
sure I know your kids are not old enough to drink wine, but I'm sure they're
No.
seeing that you're building something from scratch, that you created something that other people are enjoying. So I think that I for them to see that is huge.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
right now what is your priority for your marketing strategy?
That's a great question. A big part of it is how do we make a connection with people in the community? We're doing a ton of in person. We do sampling. We do in person events. Like I said, we want people to try the wine because that's the biggest convincer that they're going to like it. So we spend a lot of effort in making sure we're out there telling the story. We do some digital marketing, we do social media, kind of what you have to do these days. We don't spend a lot of money on social media. We kind of keep it pretty organic. I would say big focus is really just trying to build that community and build word of mouth. So if people like it, how do we get them to tell their friends? How do we get more people on board with it? Um, Kind
Yeah.
of do it more organically.
Yeah. And I've seen you guys out and about hustling, because I'm out and about
Hmm.
hustling.
Right, exactly. We're hustling at the same
We're in
places.
this together,
Yeah.
girls. So I know I'm like, oh yeah, there's SipWell again, because I'm
Yeah.
out and about. But I know we've met each other and really connected with Naturally San Diego, which I highly recommend to emerging brands or people are just even at the very beginning stages, like thinking about starting a food business or beverage business. But what other resources do you recommend, especially starting out?
Yeah, I think for me, naturally San Diego is a big one. I think in general, this, like we're solo founders, like we spend so much time on our own thinking about things and building this stuff on our own that and again, coming from like a big corporate team and a team environment, like I was craving that community. And so especially at the beginning, I was finding every possible group, Slack group, like message board, like community gathering I could go to that was around CPG and founders because um, I just wanted to. It wasn't even so much for the networking; it was for the community. Like, how can I just like get to know people and make friends and talk to people who are doing the same thing that I am? And highly recommend the Naturally Network if it's not San Diego, your local chapter. Um, Highly recommend, Startup CPG has been a good resource for me. They have a Slack channel, they have webinars, they have a bunch of resources. They do in-person meetups too.
Mhm.
Um, I've been fortunate to be a part of the Tory Burch Foundation. I was a Tory Burch Foundation fellow last year, and again, just having that community of women entrepreneurs, and that was great because it was outside of this industry too. So it wasn't even so CPG focused. I talked to someone running, a therapy practice. There was a woman who's a general contractor, someone that had an ice cream shop, and it's
Yeah.
funny how the challenges can be different, but they can be the same too across all different types of industries. And I guess a long-winded way of saying, if you're just starting out, find those resources for community because it's just a great place to ask questions. What vendor do you use for this? Or has anybody had this legal problem? Or who's the best insurance broker for what I do? All these things that if you don't have that community, you don't get the best answers for.
Yeah, and I think that there are so many different, like Startup CPG, there's Naturally Network, and I feel like I didn't even know what Slack was till like last year. Like I was like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
someone made me join Slack. I'm like, oh no, another thing I have to sign up for. But
Right.
but it's so useful. And when I was starting out, even just back in 2016, when I was just making it for fun, like my sauce for fun, there wasn't a lot of resource online. And even
Hmm.
into the pandemic, early, end of 2019, early 2020, there, I think I found Naturally San Diego, but it wasn't, they hadn't really got meetings together and then the pandemic hit. Um, so it was hard. It was really like I
Hmm.
had really scrappy just trying to Google and find people.
Hmm.
I'll be playing tennis and be telling them about what I'm trying to do, and someone will say, "Oh, I have a friend or my friend's sister started this company." I had a friend that has a keto cupcake business and then a granola business, so I would like try to meet with them to find out. But there was a huge lack of resources that we didn't have at the time. But I think it's amazing that there's so many resources today that sometimes I have to like stop reading all the emails
There's
because I'm like,
almost too many, right? Yeah, like you could be on Slack all day and you're like, wait a minute, I need to go do something.
and so yeah, and then I know you've had some pretty big news lately. Well, first you had the rebrand of your can, the new design. And so what sparked
Hmm.
the new design idea?
Yeah, so we just launched a kind of a rebrand of the whole brand. So all the naming and everything's staying the same, but kind of the strategy behind the brand positioning and the look and the feel of the brand has changed. And the inspiration for that was really to um, bring more cues about quality to the
Mm,
design and to the packaging. I think especially going just telling the story visually that this is a can that could be taken seriously and that this is good quality wine inside, kind of taking inspiration from bottles, from champagne bottles, from wine bottles. How can we bring some of those cues to a can so that the leap for the consumer isn't as much? Our original cans were beautiful and fun and people love the packaging, but I think it wasn't enough to communicate that this is really great quality,
right.
really well made wine on the inside. And so I think in wine, especially, the label tells a lot of the story, and we wanted to make sure that we were getting that right.
That's awesome. And then you also expanded in distribution as well. So can you tell us a little bit about, where can our listeners find your products and where's the new distribution that you just got into?
Yeah, I'm excited because we're a 3-year-old business, and for the vast majority of that, we were self-distributing our wine. So, literally me driving around in my minivan, delivering cases to Jimbo's and things like that. And so, we just signed with a distributor, who's a great partner, Monterey Bay Wine Company, and they're representing us in the whole state of California. So now we've expanded our distribution throughout the state of California. Um, and with that, we also just launched in Safeway in Northern California. So
So
that's our
exciting.
first, yeah, it is exciting. First major grocery chain. Um, and yeah, we're not really looking to do retail distribution beyond California right now. This state and this market, especially the wine market, is big enough as it is. So really focusing in on how we can just solidify here in our home state. But we do direct consumer shipping. So if people go to our website, we can ship pretty much nationwide. So if there are folks that live outside of California or folks want to send gifts outside of California, we can ship to people that way. But in terms of at retail, they can find us in California retailers. And all of this information is on our website, SipWellWine.com. We've got a store locator for all of our retailers. And then we also have, like I said, ability to ship online as well.
That's perfect. And then, I'll make sure I put the link for your website in the show notes as well. I
Great.
always get your wine from Jimbo's.
Yes, Jimbo's has been a huge partner for us, and I don't want to end this conversation without shouting out Jimbo's because I think for both of us, I just think they really get behind local brands and well-made brands, and I love the philosophy of the store. I love all of the staff that work there. And, I think we couldn't have grown our business to this point without that partnership. So I will always have a special place in my heart for
Oh,
Jimbo's because they're great partners of ours.
I love it. They are great partners, and going through the process that it took me to get into the store, it actually makes me feel really good about shopping at that store because
Right.
that they really value quality and healthy ingredients and organic produce. So it's really changed the way that I grocery shop myself. So it's like,
Hmm.
so I prefer to go to natural grocery stores, and I have a Jimbo's just across the street. So, and
Hmm.
plus I'm always
Yeah.
in Jimbo's demoing. So,
Yes. I prefer to go to the grocery stores where I can get
around the stores.
yes. I prefer to go to the stores where I can get my SipWell and my Wynn's Kitchen in the
Yes.
same trip and not have to go to different places.
Especially a demo on a Friday night. I will be
Yes.
celebrating the victory.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Hilary. It's so fun chatting with you and getting to know your story because we've spent some time with each other recently, which I love, but just learning how you got into the business and learning about the wine and how you I love Paso wines anyway, and learning that you work with small wineries that makes me value your company and your brand even more. So thank you so much for being on the show. And I'll make sure I put your website on the link and we'll chat with you next time.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. And as you know, I'm a huge fan of all of your products too. So maybe the next show can be a wine and sauce pairing or something
Oh
like that.
yeah.
So yeah.
Like a oh that okay, that's gonna be really fun. now,
Yeah.
now the wheels start turning,
Yes.
to
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
new ideas. So we'll have to do a collab.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
stay tuned, listeners. We will be doing a food and wine collab with Wynn's Kitchen and SipWell Wine, and I'll keep you posted on that. But until next time, thanks for listening to the show.